I'm Dorothy Chan, Head of Programs and Strategic Development at ASHK Society, and we'd like to welcome all of you to join our program this evening. We are honored to host renowned painter Benjamin Sullivan with us this evening, and my sincerest thanks go to the Chao Lee Art Foundation for offering us this opportunity. And I'm going to do a minor plug here because I really want to applaud the Chao Lee Art Foundation for bringing together leading local and international artists to collaborate on a project that celebrates a number of individuals in Hong Kong who have done so much for the community. So I will leave it for them to, but you can find out a lot more about that program on Chao Lee Arts Foundation's website. And very much like the work that we do at ASHK Society, the Foundation's work in sustaining cultural exchanges during these times of uncertainty is essential for us to continue to preserve dialogue and reminding us of our shared humanity. So thank you so much for the opportunity and for the work you do. And I would be remiss for not thanking art partners for your assisting along the way to making this evening possible. So thank you. And I'm delighted to pass the time to London-based Monica Chung, who will properly introduce Mr. Sullivan for us this evening and will conduct a dialogue with us, Mr. Sullivan after the presentation. So without further ado, Monica.
Hello, I'm Monica Chung. It is my privilege to welcome you to this evening's artist talk by Benjamin Sullivan. Before we begin, on behalf of the Chao Lee Art Foundation, I would like to welcome Benjamin to Hong Kong and thank ASHK Society for hosting this evening's event. Benjamin Sullivan is an acclaimed British portrait painter. He is the recipient of numerous awards and distinctions, notably in 2017, winner of the prestigious BP Portrait Award at the National Portrait Gallery in London. In 2018, he was commissioned to paint Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Previous to this, in 2012, he completed the seminal triptych painting All Souls College, one of his most elaborate paintings to date. Benjamin's paintings are collected by many private collections and major public institutions, including the National Portrait Gallery in London, the Scottish National Portrait Gallery, Parliament House, and the Scottish Royal Academy. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Benjamin Sullivan. Please take the stage.
Thanks so much. Well, it's wonderful to be here in Hong Kong at the ASHK Society. I've been asked to sort of talk a wee bit about some paintings, so I'm going to go through some largely in a chronological order. Let's just see if this works. Yeah. So this is really the start. Oh. Yeah. So, I mean, this painting, I'm not really going to talk about this, but this is one at the Garrick Club of the head porter. I just thought he had such a wonderful face. This was a commission, Richard Parks, and I popped myself in the painting as well so that I'm forever propping up the bar at the Garrick. And the funny thing is I took a photo from behind and looked just like my father, so we obviously have the same pose. But this is the one I really want to start with. So this is the All Souls triptych. An oil painting on 3 canvases. It took 3.5 years to paint, and little did I know when I started it that it would take that long. It was exhibited at the Ashmolean when it was finally finished in a kind of exhibition. The Ashmolean is the sort of big public gallery in Oxford, and there was an exhibition there with the associated works, which was great fun. Anyway, I'm going to go through the process because, so this is All Souls College, which is one of the constituent colleges of Oxford University. It's rather unique in that it has no students, so it's just a kind of research institution. It's known as quite an academically rigorous college, and sort of notable names throughout the 20th century, academics and intellectuals, have been research fellows there. It also, it's a very wealthy college, and it's viewed as quite eccentric, and it was at the time run a bit like an Edwardian gentleman's club, but it was very nice to be there. I spent 18 months there in the end. But originally they approached, I think, several artists with this view to make this artwork. So they approached 3 or 4 artists to submit proposals about how they might do this job, And mine, they loved. It was actually a painting of the college staff, or as they used to be called, the servants. So quite odd in that it wasn't the fellows, the famous academics, but more the below stairs. There is, of course, a tradition of below stairs paintings, paintings in the UK of staff, college servants. And at the National Portrait Gallery, I think in 2003, there was an exhibition called Below Stairs, which just focused on paintings from institutions, stately homes, and this kind of thing. Of course, in Oxford, you have very famously it's called the Scullion of Christchurch, a very famous painting in Oxford, and perhaps one of the oldest examples of a below stairs painting. And obviously I'd known this for several years, and an updated version would be Daphne Todd's painting at Lincoln College of a chef and butler. I think this was done in the early 2000s maybe. And of course Daphne's a friend of mine. She was the first female president of the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. So I began to form an idea of how one might go about this project. And other sort of notable early influences for this project. On this side we have Stan Spencer's wonderful cycle of paintings at the Sandon Memorial Chapel in Burclare. It's not actually in Oxfordshire, but because I used to live on the south coast, whenever I used to go to Oxford, I'd always drive past Burclare. So it's always associated in my mind with an Oxford painting, even though it's not. And this is kind of a wonderful thing. I don't know if anyone's actually been to Sandon Memorial Chapel, but I just think it's one of the most incredible works, really, in the UK. It's absolutely magnificent. I love the kind of use of perspective in these paintings, the way they kind of celebrate the everyday, the reverence, this kind of thing. About the same time, I became aware of this painting, which is a kind of anti-chapel at Campion Hall. So Campion Hall is the Jesuit college in Oxford, and I think I read an article in The Spectator about this painting. It's very, very unknown, but it's a little chapel decorated with frescoes by this chap Charles Marney. And Charles Marney is one of these kind of 20th century names that kind of, although his reputation is being built up again, he was largely forgotten at the time, which is very sad. But these have the same kind of feel as the Spencer paintings. It's a similar kind of thing. And I think a lot later, actually, I was commissioned to paint the master at Campion Hall, so I got to know the people there a lot better, and some of the story about how this came to be. And apparently they did first ask Spencer to come and do the series at the Lady Chapel, but apparently he didn't get on with the master at the time. Anyway, so these started to form an idea in my mind about how I might approach the proposal for the All Souls triptych. So these were the designs I submitted. So there's essentially 3 monochrome watercolors, and I decided a triptych was the perfect way to elevate the individuals and kind of bestow a kind of celebration on them, and reverence and this kind of thing, as Spencer and Marnie had done. So at the time, I got models to pose in a series of poses that I thought might represent the members of staff. But this was done having been to the college once or twice, so without really knowing what was what. So on this side, it's largely sort of cleaners, scouts as they're called, maintenance, and I kind of, I love the shape here I managed to contrive in this kind of scene here. So I was very much thinking about composition instead of maybe accurately depicting how the members of staff were. That came a lot later. The right panel is sort of kitchen, buttery, pantry, and with the, I should point out, at the back there was, this one, I mean, that's a scene actually in my house, isn't it? Yeah. And then the background here was, thinking about kitchens, food preparation, that kind of thing. And then this was administration, gardener and porter, and this one I pictured outside with the background being the Codrington. We're not allowed to call it the Codrington Library anymore. It's the All Souls Library with Wren's famous sundial there. But that was the idea. I think they loved the proposal, but of course what happened next was, this is 2008, so there was a huge recession that we remember. And I think the college got kind of very worried. I think they lost, about £30 million overnight, so they wondered if they could quite justify a painting of this nature. So, but luckily, the 2 fellows who were very much behind it was the chaplain John Drury and the economic historian Avner Offer, and they were able to convince the powers that be that this job should proceed. But they asked me to consider making a scaled-back version. So I made these kind of adjustments, without reworking a complete new design. So they're really composites from the original design, that I kind of edited on Photoshop, to be fair. So I think after doing this, I was able to suggest that I could do it in a much quicker time scale. Basically, it was a bit of a lie. I knew it was going to take a long time, but I thought as long as I got in there and got started, they would eventually see the caliber of the work and support it. So the finished painting itself obviously differs from the designs, but it reflects the reality of staying in the college, where I was there for 18 months. I didn't have time really to do a brand new design. The time limit was a real problem. So essentially I just had to start with the first person, and the first person who sat for me was Norma, who was a very long-standing college librarian. But I had the idea that to unite all the 3 panels, I'd create a kind of gentle arch that goes through the whole composition. So that was an attempt to sort of unify the whole painting, and because there was no time to plan a new design, I just had to hope for the best and hope it would work, which I think it did. So I mean, I really hope it kind of bestowed this sense of reverence on these people. I could talk so much about the individuals, because I was there for such a long time and got to know everybody, but I maybe do that later if anyone's interested. But suffice to say, I mean, the backgrounds, again, this is the the interior of the Codrington Library has a very sort of famous staircase, and the sort of kitchen element in the kitchens at All Souls, with the hanging brace of mallards. The mallard is the college mascot, actually. And the scene here, this was in one of the vestibule area where the painting actually now sits, and there's a kind of scene to the outside of Oxford, which is a kind of made-up scene. It kind of touches on socio-economic events that were going on as well. It was a little controversial in the college. And more mallards. I should say there's 27 people in the end in the painting, plus a Labrador and these mallards. So there's a wonderful, beautiful story about why they appear. I may talk about that later. But I should probably move on because more to talk about. But this is 4 paintings of the sitters in the triptych. So when everyone came to sit for me, they sat individually, and I did a drawing of everyone. So I have this wonderful collection of pencil drawings of all the sitters. Some of the sitters I thought had such wonderful faces and stories that they were worthy of a painting in its own right. So I did these further, in my own time, I did these further kind of paintings. So this is Miriam Ligo and Colin Tasker. So she was a buttery assistant, incredibly popular at the college. She'd been in kind of college, working for various colleges her whole life. She'd been at All Souls only about 12 years, but as everyone said, she had a certain style about her in the sense that she'd been around forever. And I think everyone found her a really sort of calming presence. And she was actually unfortunately, the member of staff who actually she passed away during the painting. I mean, you can see her here, where that's Miriam. I put her quite, in the foreground in the centre because she's such a big presence at the college. And also, so these were made at the same time, around 2010. The 2 in the middle actually were made in the pandemic because, as all portrait painters remember, it suddenly became very unfashionable to be very close to people painting them. So I had to go back through old projects and do things that didn't require sitting. So I made these 2 versions a lot later in the pandemic. I think Roger sadly had already died by this point, but Roger Kahn, he's the guy you'd see when you were coming in for dinner. He'd tick your name off, so he was a real presence in the college. And this chap Terry McAvoy, he was only a part-time worker at the college actually, but he had such a great look about him. I think he came from a sort of naval background, so he was always incredibly tidy and well presented. So I mean, the whole thing at All Souls took 3.5 years. It really was, one of the biggest projects I've ever done. I'm probably unlikely to do anything quite that size or stature, but it led on to many other things. One of which is this painting. So this is Hugo Williams, the poet, and I was a real fan of his poetry. And the painting came about really because it wasn't a commission. I asked him to sit for me, and luckily one of the visiting fellows at All Souls when I was there was the poet Stephen Romer, and this is a drawing I did of Stephen Romer in Paris in 2012. He's an English poet who lives in the Loire Valley. He's a kind of generation younger than Hugo Williams, but he knew him very well, and I suggested to Stephen how about I paint Hugo's portrait, so he asked him for me, and luckily he was very touched with the idea. I think we actually did it in 2015. We'd arranged to do it, and sadly Hugo had been suffering at the time from kidney failure, so he'd been on dialysis for a long time. And we arranged a sitting. He was happy to do it anyway. We arranged a sitting, and I went down to Islington and knocked on his door, and his French wife answered the door and said, oh, Hugo got the call last night and he's in hospital. So he actually was having a new kidney. So he was in hospital, and we had to wait another year for the sitting to take place. But luckily he, pulled through, and we did the sitting at his house a year later. Another one with a link to All Souls is this chap, Michel Strauss. He's a kind of well-known art collector, really. I mean, he passed away, sadly, a few years ago. But he contacted me out of the blue when I was at All Souls, and he'd seen a painting of mine in London that he wanted to buy. And I said, lovely, and we had a bit of a chit-chat, and I said, I live in Suffolk, and he lived in Norfolk, but I said, at the moment, I'm artist in residence at All Souls College. And he said, how funny, my stepfather used to be a fellow there, my stepfather, Isaiah Berlin. So, obviously he's a very famous name at All Souls, but I think his mother, her third husband was Isaiah Berlin, so they grew up at Headington House in Oxford. But he was a wonderful chap to get to know. He's an art collector and had been, for a long time, the head of Sotheby's Impressionist and Modern department. And he's pictured here. I painted him at his home in Norfolk, full of the most incredible paintings, and luckily some of mine. And I pictured him with a couple of sale catalogues. These were his very sort of famous sales throughout the 20th century. We'll move on now to the next sort of biggest project I had after All Souls was I became artist in residence at the Reform Club, which was a great thing to do. It was a very different project. I was there really to record club life and do portraits of members, but much sketchier things, and I was really getting into watercolours at the time, so I did kind of a dozen or so watercolours like this of the exterior and interior of the building. The building is absolutely incredible. It was designed by Sir Charles Barry, and is known as being one of the most beautiful clubs interior in terms of the interior in London. So I did lots of these kind of black and white sketches. This one I'm always really fond of because it's so, represents club life so well, just a pair of ankles and a telegraph. That's a scene you'd see all the time. Couple of the interesting things I did there. This is the Labour politician Roy Hattersley, Lord Hattersley. He'd been a member of the Reform for a long time, and I made these little painted studies, really. They're not kind of finished portraits that I'd normally do, more painted studies, just because of the time scale involved. I had to be quite quick. But I did it really because we're both actually Sheffield lads, so I thought there might be some poetry to me painting. He's quite a pugnacious individual. I quite liked him, but when he turned up, I mentioned that I was from Sheffield as well, and said I was a Sheffield United fan. He's a well-known Sheffield Wednesday fan, the football teams, and he said if I'd known that, I wouldn't have turned up. So mostly I did drawings at the Reform Club. I did about maybe 40 to 60 of these little sketches, very quick, in the club. I absolutely loved doing them, actually. They're, really sort of different things for me to do, because normally my work's sort of very focused and highly worked, and these were very different. But I'm showing these really to highlight the importance of drawing in my practice. I love it, love drawing, love looking at drawings. And these, so drawing as preparation. At some point around 2008, I realised all my best drawings were kind of underneath my paintings. And I was quite distressed at this because, I like drawing, as I said, and somehow I'd lost all the drawings. So I started working on, if I had a commission, I'd work on paper. I'd do a drawing and then transfer the drawing to a canvas. And in that way, well, it serves two purposes. You'd have another go at drawing someone. So you'd do the first sketch and then proceed to the painting. So in a way, you'd have two goes at painting someone. And also, you had, I built up this collection of drawings. And, I mean, this is the one of the, I showed you the painting of Michel Strauss. This is the first drawing of him. And these were all, studies for what eventually became paintings. So this one here, this is Maggie Snowling. She was the president of St John's in Oxford. So this is a commission I worked on. I just have a few slides of that show the process, So this is the drawing we saw in the other slide. And essentially, so I'll do the drawing on paper, then photograph, and you can resize on programs such as Photoshop, and then to get it to the specific size for your canvas. So this is the canvas, and I would have traced the drawing onto the canvas and then underpainted in a kind of monochrome. And the canvas is also scaled up for to put the body in later. This was a full-length portrait. I'm just showing you the actual head. So one underpaints in monochrome first, then starts to colour. I'm quite sort of bold, and I use the biggest brush possible, and then hopefully define as I'm going on. I think this the paint I use as well is quite sort of claggy, and I love the effect it gets when you can drag the kind of dry paint across the canvas. So this is sort of further building up the paint, working on the highlights, getting the background in nice and early. And then always make the darks darker at this stage, make the lights lighter, the highlights. Get some of the body in. Render the background, calm things down. And then start to add the detail to the background. She was pictured in the President's Lodgings at St John's, which is a very sort of ornate room. So I have a couple of slides that just show the process in terms of doing a study. So this is a painting called Study, and this is also the study of study, as it were. So one would do the drawing first, really just concentrating on the figure, and then the thing would be to go straight to the painting. I'm always in a rush, so I have lots of drawings like this that aren't really finished. Well, whether it's finished or not, it doesn't really matter. But so the drawing would be done then, and then transfer to canvas, and there's sort of some subtle differences, but you have a collection of wonderful drawings at the end of it. This is another example. This is a chap called Julian Bingley, and again, like the last slide, I would have done the figure as a drawing and then transferred to the canvas and finished the painting. But this is a different, sort of a unique thing for me to have done, where I actually, after the painting was finished, I went back to the drawing and made a kind of different background. For some reason, I just felt this, could sort of work as a more finished drawing. So after I'd finished the painting, I finished this drawing, really worked it up to a very finished state with this kind of different background, which I sort of enjoyed doing. Of course, sometimes I get asked to do drawings, just a drawing for its own sake, which is as I said, I love drawing, so it's wonderful to do some drawings. And these are 3 examples of commission drawings. So this was done for the MCC in London, Marylebone Cricket Club. So this is the South African cricketer Ali Backer. And then these two were for Hertford College in Oxford. This was the butler, Kenny Lewis, and this, she was a classicist, Stephanie West, and actually her husband actually was a fellow at All Souls, Martin West, so, and I'd known him a bit at All Souls. Yeah, so love doing these, really happy to be commissioned to do just drawing. So I've gone now to this, obviously, the late Queen. So I was commissioned to do this in 2018 by the RAF Club on Piccadilly. They were celebrating their centenary and commissioned a painting of her. It's pictured in the White Drawing Room at Windsor, which is, I was told, where the Queen really felt at home. She thought of Windsor as her home. They had a kind of private flat there. And this was in the White Drawing Room, which was one of the sort of semi-private state rooms that they use for functions. When you paint a monarch, I mean, you're not allowed that much time with them. And she was, of course, very, you know, she was in her 90s at the time, so I don't think she found it particularly easy to sit still. But I was told I'd be given an hour, and if she was enjoying herself, she may stay longer. So she stayed for an hour and 20 minutes, so my chat couldn't have been that bad, I hope. The painting, it was full length, so, and much commented on was her Chanel handbag. I mean, she came in and popped it there, so I thought it should remain in the painting itself. This was one of the first studies, so I had the Queen, we tried sitting both ways. So this way she was looking out the window at the rose garden, as I remember, and she got very cross because she thought the roses had been pruned too early, and I think that soured her expression. So in the end we switched round and she cheered up. So these are just 4 images showing the, you know, a bit of the process. You know, you can see the underpainting, sort of monochrome, and I often sort of tone the canvas a certain colour. I mean, I knew here it was going to be a blue dress, but if one kind of underpaints with complementary colours, you have this wonderful optical effect that the sort of the base layer kind of shines through, so we have you know, an orange poking through the blue, which is a wonderful, you know, one of the great things that you can do with paint, obviously. And so it's, yeah, in the middle is my daughter giving a crit and deciding what she thought about the Queen, whether I'd got her right or not. So that's a detail of the finished portrait, which I think she was pleased with. She came in the end to unveil the painting, and this is the painting being unveiled at the RAF Club in 2018. And it was a wonderful event, and you know, the wonderful thing about the late Queen, she kind of, I mean, the room was about 80 people, and she spoke to absolutely everyone, you know, and everyone was made to feel quite special there. And we're discussing the weather because we remembered just how cold it was in that kind of March when we painted it. This is a version I did, interestingly, because it was almost a painting that would never have been finished were it not for the pandemic. So, like I was saying earlier, the pandemic hit and it became unfashionable to sit in rooms with other people. So my very sort of busy schedule disappeared. So I did a few projects that, you know, things that I needed to finish, and this was in fact the first one. And this is, I've currently loaned this to my livery company in London, so this is on the wall there, although I still own it. But in a way, it's the version 2 is the one I'm most pleased with. I think for some reason maybe it was just the quiet of the time, you know, I was able to concentrate. and it's obviously not full length. It's a much smaller painting. So I'll skip ahead now just to this. I've included this just because it's one of my favourite paintings. This is called Two Artists. So it's a painting of my daughter and I, made I think 2019, and I called it Two Artists because my father had just died, sadly, and he'd been an artist as well. And so there'd always been two artists in the family, and of course it was upsetting that there no longer was. But then I kind of did this self-portrait, and my daughter was drawing at the bottom of my feet, and I sort of realised, of course, there still are two artists, So this painting is actually, it was bizarrely bought by a Cambridge college, so it hangs in Trinity Hall in Cambridge. So I'll talk a bit about this one, which is John Sentamu. So this was commissioned by the National Portrait Gallery for their collection. John Sentamu was, I think he was the first black archbishop in the Church of England. So he was the Archbishop of York for a number of years. And he's obviously posed in his finery from the Archbishop of York robes. And I mean, that they added really another 6 months to the job, the sort of level of detail in the mitre and the robe. But I mean, really fun to paint, but it caused me to think afterwards that I should have an Archbishop surcharge next time I do a painting of that nature. But you see some of because it was at the end of lockdown, and there's a kind of sign, the signs that happen to be everywhere, advising you to wash your hands. And also in the back there's a painting, I can't remember who did it. It's a sort of Renaissance image showing the biblical story of the loaves and fishes, the feeding of the multitude. And that's because John was very passionate about food poverty. And in fact, his maiden address at the House of Lords was a talk about tackling food poverty. And I made one sort of very small change here, which was putting in the footballer Marcus Rashford, who at the time was also talking about food poverty. So that's a kind of sort of jokey reference to that in a way. And at the bottom you have, this is a cut-up clerical collar. One of Sentamu's most famous incidents was when he was on the Andrew Marr show live on TV, and he took off his dog collar and cut it up live on television as a protest at the Robert Mugabe regime. And it was a very affecting video. You can find it on YouTube. It's quite powerful to watch even now. But that was a kind of reference to that. Okay, so this is something I did. It was actually commissioned before the pandemic, then put on ice until after, and had to be sort of renegotiated after. But these are 3 actors, and I've put for a secret institution because I'm not really allowed to talk about it that much, although I did ask if I could include it in this presentation, and they said yes. It was commissioned by the Garrick Club, and it's 3 of their younger sort of famous actor members. So we have Matthew McFadden, Damian Lewis, and Benedict Cumberbatch, and they're all they're sort of chums, they know each other. They're all around my age, I think. I think Cumberbatch is my age. So the club thought it'd be wonderful, to get 3 of their famous members painted. And I was asked to do it in a scene reminiscent of this painting, which is called The Clandestine Marriage by George Clint. And this is in the Garrick Club's collection. It actually it hangs in the coffee room, as I recall. It's quite a big painting. But I included it as a much smaller version in the background here. This is the Clandestine Marriage. So this is set in the library in the Garrick, and I've kind of pictured it as in a kind of rehearsal. So there's, you know, accoutrements of the actor's trade. I went to the National Theatre and borrowed all these costumes, you know, from various Shakespeare plays. They've all done Shakespeare on the stage as well as their illustrious film careers. So, and at the time, McFadyen was I think he'd just finished filming Succession. So in here I put a little video still from Succession in this frame. And Cumberbatch had just done the Wes Anderson short film about the sort of Roald Dahl thing. So I put a still from that. And then Damien Lewis was working on his solo career as music. You know, he's also a musician, and he just brought out this album, so I have that there. And there's also a club mouse that they can never get rid of, so he's eating a Malteser. There we go. And these are the initial, you know, so going back to drawing again, these are the initial drawings I did of them all. Which are great things to have. I'm hoping to exhibit them soon, actually. But and they're pretty much the similar poses, apart from Cumberbatch, to echo the George Klimt painting I had standing in the end. And I also have, you know, several other studies of them and small painted portraits that I'll exhibit soon, I hope. So I'm just going to finish with these two, actually, which is commissioned by the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. These were two scientists who'd both won the Nobel Prize. So this is Fraser Stoddart and Richard Henderson. Both sort of Cambridge. Well, Henderson lived in Cambridge. I think Stoddart had been in Cambridge at some point, although most of his academic career was in Chicago. But they both came to sit for me in Suffolk. You know, Fraser came over from Chicago, and they're both sat in my studio. You know, wonderful just to have them as studio paintings, really, without having too much referring to them. Although there's a little watercolor, I think here, of Richard Henderson in his lab in Cambridge, and some things relating to Stoddart here. But the reason I'm sort of closing with these is Fraser came to sit for me, I think it was 2022, and he was telling me at the time, you know, he was in his 80s, and he's sadly dead now, but he was telling me he was just about, after 35 years, he was leaving Chicago to come to Hong Kong, and he moved to Hong Kong in 2023, I think, and he was a member of the university here before dying the following year. And I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say, because I've gone on for quite some time. So, thank you.
Testing? Okay.
Testing.
That was great.
Thank you.
A real insight into the practice. Now, what I really want to know, why are you in Hong Kong right now?
Well, it's been wonderful to come here, but obviously I'm working as well. It's not just a holiday. So I'm doing this wonderful project for the Chao Lee Foundation. So I've been commissioned to paint Phyllis and Alia Marwar, who run Mother's Choice, this incredible charity here in Hong Kong that I'm sure lots of people know. So we're currently having sittings. So I've been doing that yesterday morning and this morning. That's why I look tired. And we have further sittings tomorrow, and indeed the whole time I'm here. So, but it's been great. They're wonderful sitters, and the project's wonderful. And I'm quite excited about the painting. Yeah.
And when you usually embark on a portrait, when I look at your paintings, I feel a real warmth and empathy to the subjects. And it's as though you're painting someone you've known for years. There's this transmission of energy, and there's a fondness in the expressions. How do you connect with the sitter?
I suppose just by, talking, trying to be empathic. In terms of the actual painting, I don't try and delve into the person's soul or anything, because I'm never sure what that is. So my technique has always been to capture just what's in front of you and hope that everything else takes care of itself. Maybe that's the case, I don't know.
When you speak to other artists and they paint portraiture, they sort of say, well, subjects with a public profile, they always have a mask. And it's whether you can strip back the mask, whether they, and sometimes during sittings, it peels off in layers. You find that you've painted quite a few dignitaries and even royalty. So,
I don't think people sort of really can hide who they are. I think that's the great thing about it. Maybe so, but the thing with a sitting is that it's a very intimate thing. You never really do that with a person. Sit just one-to-one, looking at someone, not talking. The only time you may do that is when you're having your hair cut, but they're the other side of you then. But I think through that, there's a kind of, maybe something happens, you get to know someone in a way that doesn't happen at other times, maybe.
yes, and the artist also gives something of themselves when they're painting a portrait. I think that's also the mutual sort of.
I think so. Yeah. I'm always myself. So. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
So portraiture, it's one of the oldest traditions in art, one of the most enduring practices. What led you to become a portrait painter?
Well, as I touched upon, my father was a portrait painter, and I tried very hard not to do it because you go through that phase as a child of not wanting to do what your dad did, and I did try very hard not to, but I was naturally inclined to it, and I'm an only child as well, so I've always thought I'm quite used to being in a room, in a studio on my own, just working away for hours on end. So I think being an artist is was a kind of a natural thing for me to do. Yeah. So at some point I realised I was good at it, and enjoyed it. So it seemed to naturally occur.
You work with drawings, and do you ever use photography and other sort of mediums to influence the painting?
One will use photography. I do it, yeah, because I have, with a portrait, I normally have between 6 and 8 sittings, which is considered a lot, apart from when you do royalty, where you have to condense it. But 6 to 8 sittings still, I tend to reserve the actual sittings for working on the face, so I'll take reference photos for doing, the folds in fabric and that kind of thing, so it does have its place. And also computer programs, you're able to manipulate images as well, resize things, so as well as having, some techniques that go back to the Renaissance and before, I use modern equipment as well. It's a happy marriage. You do what works, really, what's best.
So you're not against using technology, so
no,
dare I ask about AI?
Well, I haven't dabbled with that, no, but maybe that's the next thing to contend with.
Or maybe to help?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I should investigate, shouldn't I?
So what was it really like painting the Queen?
It was wonderful. Yeah, I think she's just obviously very used to putting nervous artists at their ease, so she was very friendly. Yeah, we chatted about the weather because, as I touched on, it was kind of freezing cold. And she was, very family orientated. It was before all the horrible things that happened with, other members of the royal family. She just talked very positively about, I think there were the upcoming weddings, and children about to be born. So you could tell she wanted to talk about family most of the time, really. So that was nice to think of her as a family person. I mean, it was incredible to paint her, you know. And at the moment, I think I'm probably allowed to say that I'm doing a painting of His Majesty the King at the moment as well, which is we're actually doing it in the same room, which is extraordinary.
Wow,
I didn't
amazing.
think I would be, but
You're probably one of the few artists to have painted the late Queen and the King.
maybe, yeah. I mean, I know some people have painted him as Prince Charles as he was, but maybe so. Although I do know he's currently sitting for lots of artists. I think everyone's trying to, you know, have him painted as soon, you know, quite quickly, as it were.
Do you feel a certain pressure when you're painting, well, for instance, the longest serving monarch? Did you feel more pressure than with other commissions, or did you just treat it as another subject as much as you could?
I mean, both. I mean, yeah, I tried to treat it as a subject, but you can't get around the fact that she, you know, must have been one of the most famous people in the world, you know, and this incredible rich history, just her life stretching back decades. So, I mean, one cannot help being affected by that, I think.
I know that you've painted quite a few interesting subjects, particularly one who lived in the Channel Islands.
Ah, yeah.
Maybe you'd like to say something about that.
Okay, yeah, in fact, I could have included, I mean, there were many things I could have included, but yeah, this is a chap called David Gainsborough Roberts, who he was essentially an antiques collector, but he was famous for having a collection of Marilyn Monroe dresses that he sold just before he died, but he had some amazing things. I think the most famous one was the red sequin dress he had, and he had them all in his house in the Channel Islands, you know, just not kind of protected from the elements or anything. And I know when they were valued, the guy from Phillips couldn't believe it. You know, he said, "Oh, these shouldn't be here." You know, but yeah, he had all sorts of memorabilia.
From you, I mean, to be a portrait painter, there's of course observation. From your observations, painting all the subjects, can you tell us anything about humanity, the essence of man? I mean, I think Rembrandt says something about when you paint a portrait, it sort of portrays every line, every violence, every kindness. Is there anything you can share from all your years of painting faces?
I mean, the one thing I would say, going back to, it's something I could have said about the All Souls triptych, was the wonderful thing about being there and doing all these people. Was it, you know, I got to know them quite well, and they all had something unique about them, you know, a kind of story about their lives that made them sort of unique, you know, and that was a real kind of wonderful thing to find about humanity, you know, that we all have something that makes us unique and quite in a way an incredible story, you know, and they all had that, and I think that's true of everyone, really. Yeah.
What's time? Do we have to? Is it time to open it up to questions? Does anyone have any questions? I think there is. Okay, there's a question over there.
Hi. Could you share with us the insight? I see. I forgot the name of the first painting that you show. Is a gentleman. And then, what was the gentleman's name?
Richard Parkes.
Right. And when you paint Mr. Parkes and the Queen, just looking at the pictures from the slides from very far away, I noticed you handle their wrinkles or the shades in the face. I wonder. I think. Does it define a face for you, or how do you handle the wrinkles? And when the Queen, even though at her age, and saw herself in your painting, is there any feedback over the years from different people who sit for you? Thank you.
I mean, with portrait paintings, I do like a kind of raking light that kind of comes across the face, that does enhance the wrinkles and, you know, the features in general. And I mean, the one you mentioned of Richard Parkes, he was such an amazing looking chap, you know, because he had these kind of facial warts that I think he was quite proud of, really. And I mean, one is to not make it, you know, you don't try and make it into caricature, but you don't hide, obviously, what's on the face. And I never get involved with trying to beautify someone, because I wouldn't know what to do, you know. And once you go down that road, where does one stop, you know? But and I think generally, you know, people know my style of work, so when I'm commissioned to do something, they know that I'm going to be sort of realistic. So hopefully people are happy with the results, and that's most of the time the case, I think.
I wouldn't mind being painted by you. So. Any other? Okay. What's the lady in the middle? Yeah. There's a mic coming to you.
I just have a quick question. When you're introducing your preparation work for their All Souls painting, and then you say you did some separate portraitures for some of the staff, and you said because they have an interesting face. So I'm just wondering, in your definition, what constitutes as an interesting face for you? Because everybody is unique, right? So supposedly everybody should be interesting. But why you pick some of them, you think is interesting, and others are not? Thank you.
Great question.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, perhaps I wouldn't limit it to face. I mean, because the people that I made extra paintings of, they all, I mean, they did have interesting faces, really, but they also had something about their personality that made me sort of connect with them. But yeah, you're quite right. I think everyone has an interesting face. You know, it really is true, and that the All Souls triptych, again, that kind of demonstrates that they were all unique people with unique faces, you know. And that, I mean, the other thing I didn't say about the All Souls triptych was I was quite pleased to turn up there and find it was quite, well, relatively ethnically diverse as well. So there were lots of different types of people to paint, which I thought was great. You know, I thought, but before I started, I wondered if it would just be, you know, a sea of white faces, but it wasn't. So.
Okay, perhaps one in the back and then this gentleman here.
I'm curious, when I'm sure a lot of people approach you to commission your work, and I'm curious, like, could you tell us more about the process you go through before you decide whether you would take on that commission, and once you take it on, how much research do you do about that person's background before you actually do the drawing? I'm just curious.
Yeah, okay, well, I normally always say yes. But, I mean, research, yeah, I'll do some research, but the important thing is actually to meet someone socially before. I find it very hard to just turn up and paint someone on the day that I've never met. So that's always really important, and we did that with, you know, the Mother's Choice. Exactly, yeah. So it would be, strikes me as it'd be very unusual to just turn up on the day and paint someone in the morning that you'd never met. I'd find that quite odd. So I always tend to, you know, and it's nice to sort of socialise with the sitters as well, you know, to break bread. And I think I find that helps because, you know, you're not just in a work environment with them, you're socialising as well.
Have you ever painted anyone that you have no connection with and you just think, God, I just want to get it over with?
Yes.
You don't have to say it, but you can just go.
Yeah, there was one guy, yeah. Yeah. I won't say who.
He's forever implanted here, though. Okay.
I didn't show the painting, so.
There's a question, I think, this gentleman.
I just have a question about how you first start experimenting with the ideas with the models or the people who are sitting for you. And I'm fascinated about the way that you start off in sketching. I love the sketches that you have. The drawings are so strong. And I'm wondering at what size you're starting off. Are you starting in a sketchbook or on a paper on board? Just to give you that flexibility if you want to change the angle. Yeah, what's that first sitting like for you?
Yeah, I've never really liked working in a sketchbook, so I always have a piece of paper on a board, you know, and Scale's funny. I sort of chop and change. It's often decided by what I've done previously. So if I've done something quite big in the previous job I've done, I'm sort of inclined to do something small, and vice versa. But sometimes I don't plan until the day. Coming to Hong Kong, I have this huge art bag, and I packed really too much stuff for every eventuality, and I've kind of got 6 or 7 different types of paper because I hadn't decided what type of paper I'd use until the sitting. So I took all types, because on the day one or other may take my fancy, so I really come prepared, I think.
Thank you.
So with the commission here, you're here for 2 weeks, and what will happen? You're making sketches and...
Yeah, so I'll have two drawings on paper, and then 2 small canvases that will be painted, just of the heads, because it was too much of an unknown, because it's a double portrait. I did make some big canvases before I left, but now that I actually see the setting and we have the composition, it occurs to me that none of the canvases will work, so I'll have to go back and make another one. So you can never really tell until you're there.
So you've got a good chance to sort of experiment and so forth. Great. Okay, over here and then over there.
Hi. You've spoken previously about, the power of art, and particularly how breech was used in campaigns to normalize breastfeeding. After seeing the impact that this portrait had, are you now more inclined to create works and hopes to enact social change? And as an extension, how do you think art should be used to enact social change?
Okay, we should explain what breech is, perhaps.
Yeah, so that was a portrait of my partner at the time and our child, when our daughter was born, and it was kind of such an affecting thing, obviously, because she was a breech birth. You go through that, and it's quite a worrying time, but it was painted sort of after the pregnancy, and it's quite a very sort of moving, quiet painting of mother and daughter, essentially. But it had all this profound effect, because it was taken up as a kind of breastfeeding campaign tool, really. Quite. I found it really surprising, but absolutely amazing, and it's still referred to. So yeah, I wouldn't know what's, because essentially I just do some painting in a studio, and then the paintings go out into the wider world, and you can't really affect what they do. Or what, how people perceive them, how they're taken, and I wouldn't like to personally. It would be difficult for me to do a painting that was a kind of campaigning thing. I wouldn't know quite how to do that, but I'm amazed, and it was incredible to see it used in that way, and I find it really moving and touching. Yeah.
Well, it won the award.
And it won, yeah.
It won. It was the winner for the BP Portrait Award, so it's quite a strong statement by the National Gallery too, so National Portrait Gallery. Okay, I think there's a question over... Oh, can we go to that lady over there in the back? Just that one there, sorry.
Hello, I have a couple of questions. So one, I'm interested in what kind of medium you use for your drawing. It looks really refined, but you always refer to it as a kind of sketch. And I also want to ask what advice you would have for somebody who wants to improve on drawing realistically. And finally, you mentioned that several sittings that you do for the portrait. What happens at the different sittings? Do you focus on a different part of the face? I'm just very curious.
So forgive me, the first question was what materials?
What material do you use for drawing?
Yeah.
For your drawing?
Again, that can chop and change depending my mood or what kind of paper I'm using, but quite often just pencil and maybe, if I'm using a buff toned paper, then Conti crayon for the white highlights. But I also enjoy using charcoal now and again, pastel. But more often than not, I mean, today I've been using my pencils, and great fun, Sorry, the second part of the question was?
What advice would you have for
Advice,
somebody
yeah.
who wants to draw realistically and do it well? Any concept that it's very important to you that you feel?
I don't think a concept, no, just, keep doing it. Because, you're always learning, even me, just doing a new face, it's, I'm improving, one would hope, and so I think keep doing. There's no kind of shortcut, I don't think. So it's just looking, having someone in front of you and drawing them. And as for the other part of the question, so if I've got a full complement of sittings, which would be 6 to 8, I'd use the first 2 for a drawing, and I'd just draw the head, and then the following sort of 3 sittings, I'd paint the head, and then use maybe 2 sittings for the hands. Yeah, so those are the important bits, really. And then everything else I can do from a reference photo, because it's not as important as, the head. Obviously, that's the key to a portrait, isn't it? So, but with some, the hands are great as well, and I'm really keen on spending a long time on the hands. Yeah.
Can we go to that one? So that lady over there. Thanks.
Hi, can I just ask, where you've got things in the background or foreground that reference the people in their backgrounds and everything, do they propose those items to you, or you see a range of things and then you decide it? Is it their idea of themselves or something that you've seen?
It can be a bit of both. You have to be quite sort of gentle with it, because it can come quite contrived if you sort of overload a painting with things that relate to the sitter. But I have had people before, bring an item in themselves and place it on a table. So I have to. Sometimes I take it away if I don't like it. But I think just be very careful. But sometimes people will suggest something, and sometimes it's a nice suggestion, But it has to fit the composition of what you're doing, and. It's good, obviously, if it doesn't overload the painting with meaning that you don't want, or, it looks too choreographed, which would be a bad thing, I think. So, gently is the key, I think.
I guess because usually they're commissioned paintings of other people. They're not commissioning paintings of themselves. So you're interpreting them, and they're being asked, their portraits being asked to be commissioned by another body. So it's really up to you, isn't it, rather than.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's one kind of step away, because it's you and the sitter, and the commissioning body is someone else. So really, that's the person you're working for. So normally the sitter understands that. Yeah.
I guess everyone wants to be portrayed in a great light, right? So.
I think so. Yeah. Have their best side done and everything. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, this lady here.
Hi, I think this kind of relates to the previous question, which was, I noticed that in your paintings you have such great, wonderful detail, especially in the backgrounds, and like the previous question about the objects that people bring in, especially the sitters that you might include from aspects of their lives. I was wondering how you could capture such detail without taking too much of the focus away from the subject itself.
Interesting. I'm not sure I'm even really conscious of it when I'm doing it. I kind of just. I take in. I view the composition as a whole. So, in some terms, I don't even maybe see it as a portrait. I just see it as a composition, and so I think I'll do that bit there as a composition, that bit there, and then hope the whole thing works. So. But yeah, I think I'm probably known for doing quite busy paintings with lots of detail. But I've always enjoyed. That's part of the enjoyment for me. So I hope it sort of works. Yeah.
Can you say something about the palette? that you use? It's almost sort of like a subdued sort of.
I mean, it's a fairly conventional palette of paints, really, with a kind of range of about 12 colours. Yeah, I mean, I think an American told me once that I had a very English palette. I think they meant sort of like Sickert and this kind of thing, but so perhaps it's, yeah, this kind of English sensibility. I don't know, maybe, but muted. That would sort of work, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It sort of feels sort of the less is more and sort of reduction.
Yeah, I mean, and the light is different all over the world, isn't it? I mean, I did a project in the Cayman Islands about a year ago, and that looks very different because it's really colourful because the light's just so different there, you know. So probably that influences as well.
Christine, in front row.
Thank you, Benjamin, for the presentation. I just wanted to say that we all know how hard it is to be an artist. And I think we have a few aspiring young artists in the room. How would you describe your journey? And what advice do you have for young students of art who wish to break out?
I guess I was pretty lucky, really, because I did my degree show in Edinburgh, and from the degree show, had a commission to paint a sort of well-known judge in Edinburgh, and then all his other legal friends saw it, and so they all wanted one, you know. So there was a degree of luck, I think. It's difficult to know how to advise, other than to say, and it's a bit of a cliche, but just to keep on painting. And that's, I mean, the thing I focused on was, you know, always painting for myself, not painting what you think other people like. I think that's a key to it as well, and hope that kind of feeds into what people want, because I think if you're being true to yourself, there'll be better paintings, and then people will be more interested in them, I think. Hopefully that's some advice.
So that's what you would say to your former self as you were starting out?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, behind Jane. There's just in the second row, in the middle.
Hi. What is the most challenging aspect of capturing a person's likeness or personality?
Gosh, I mean, I don't even tend to get involved in personality. I just tend to go for likeness, and in the hope that somehow that translates into personality, like I touched on that earlier. But how I do it, I don't know, other than just looking at the person's face and recording what you see. Yeah. I mean, I start in the middle and work out, you know, so hopefully.
But is there a moment when you think, nailed it, I've got it, when it turns a corner?
Maybe, and like I was saying, you know, doing a drawing first helps, because essentially you're doing a drawing and then you do the painting, so you have two goes at doing the same person. So I often feel that you know, one feeds into the other. So when you start the painting, you can look at the drawing and think, oh well, I may need to do the nose a bit smaller, or you know, that ear's wrong, that kind of thing. So having a couple of goes really helps, you know.
There's a question over here, this gentleman.
We wake up every morning with different moods: happy, sad, depressed, hungry, late. Does your mood impact the way you see the sitters and the way you paint them?
I think it absolutely does. Yeah, good question. Yeah. So it helps if I'm not tired, I think, or not tired or depressed when I'm painting a portrait. I think that can, yeah, more so your mood as opposed to the sitter's mood, I think, can transmute more. Yeah. So that's very true. Yeah.
Well, they're loving you tonight, Benjamin.
Hi. I wonder, you mentioned the big project you took 3.5 years, but for a single portrait, like the Queen, how many days or months do you take to finish? And do you do different projects at the same time? You switch between projects?
I'd say if you're doing a single portrait, I tend to allow 6 weeks. But as I said, with the painting of John Centimune, because he was wearing such complicated clothing, that can extend it by an untold amount, really. Yeah, so I mean, it could be 6 weeks, it could be double. I tend to think it's best to work on just one thing at a time, but it's never as simple as that. So I was saying to Alia today that I'll get back to the studio, and she and her mother will be on one side, and they'll be looking at the king on the other side. So I'll have several things going in the studio. Yeah.
I'd like to see a snapshot of that.
Yeah.
Okay, last questions. Anyone? Okay, another one from the gentleman.
What's your studio arrangement and what's your lighting for the model, and how are you managing to bring that over to Hong Kong to work on this double portrait?
So I have a very small studio in Suffolk. I'm sort of desperate to move somewhere better, really. I mean, the walls are closing in with stacks of paintings, but it is quite good light there. It's sort of north-facing, which artists like, so it's the very sort of constant light. And part of me does, I'll be sad when I leave it, although I need to leave it and get somewhere bigger. But yeah, I mean, I'm not doing the actual canvas in Hong Kong. I'll do that in the studio because it was too big to bring, really. But the lighting will be different here to there. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, so it's kind of how you manage that.
How will you deal with that?
Well, I mean, you know, that's one of the reasons why I do the colour studies while I'm here. So I'll have 2 little paintings, so I can refer to the colour I've made here in the studio in Suffolk, and hopefully that'll keep. The reference will still be true. Yeah.
You still have another week to capture the Hong Kong sunshine when it comes. Yeah.
Well, no sunshine today.
No,
alas.
no, you won't get any in the UK. Okay. Final question. Another question from this gentleman.
You are commissioned to make those portraits, but if you have the choice of painting whoever you would like to paint, who would you paint today?
That's true, although I mean, for example, the one of Hugo Williams, that was one I chose to do, so not a commission. Yeah, I mean, there was a guy I wanted to paint, but he died. But occasionally I see someone, you know, just someone in the street, or I saw a guy in my local town up a ladder cleaning a window once, and I didn't know him, but I got to know him later on and then painted him, you know, so it can be something as simple as that, really. I mean, it doesn't have to be a famous name, just someone with a sort of a unique presence, or... You know.
We haven't spoken about self-portraiture. How often do you paint yourself?
I've done lots in the past, yeah, but I've maybe been too busy for the last 2 or 3 years to do one. But yeah, maybe I'll do another in time.
And when you do them, is it more of a break between commissions, or is it?
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
something?
exactly.
It's more of a sort of breathing.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and it has that odd thing because, of course, you only ever look at yourself the wrong way around because you're looking in a mirror, so you have a sort of different view of yourself than other people do. So I kind of look at my face and I think, you know, sort of big nose, chubby cheeks, and that's what I do.
Is it easy? I know. Is it easy to paint yourself? Are you critical at all, or you just sort of think, oh God, the lines, what a year?
Oh yeah, the grey hairs are getting more pronounced, and I think, yeah, I mean, I always enjoy it when I do it. Yeah, but there needs to be a substantial break, I think, to do one. Maybe at the end of this year I'll have time to try.
Any more? Okay, gentleman in the middle.
Hi. So I noticed that a lot of your paintings were kind of, so the sitters were at a lower angle and they were viewed from a higher angle.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
Oh yeah, I was going to talk about that actually, but yeah, that was in a different slide. I thought I didn't really have time, but it's a kind of extended perspective that it was fashionable 20th century English artists use it, like Carol Waite, Stanley Spencer, but it goes back, if you look at the, you know, pre-Renaissance to the Quattrocento, that kind of They have the similar kind of extended perspective. And I remember going for an eye test once, and I have one lazy eye and one eye that works, so this eye is my peripheral vision. And he said to me, "Oh, you probably have a really strange sense of perspective." And that suddenly clicked, so I'd get close to people because, I need to see them. And then when you're that close, you can't take in the whole image in one viewpoint, so you have to move your head, and that gives you a second viewpoint, really. So it's kind of, it's kind of perspectives merging in a way that doesn't in the Renaissance. They have a more true one-dimensional or one-point perspective. Yeah.
I also have another question. So I also noticed that not a lot of the statues were making eye contact, like with whoever's viewing it. So what does that mean as well?
Yeah, that's true. Although, again, I chop and change. So and occasionally people, like I'm painting the king at the moment, and he very much wanted to be looking out the window. I think he found it more comfortable. But what felt appropriate for this project I'm doing in Hong Kong is actually they're both the sitters are looking at me, so at the viewer. So again, it's part of not going into the situation with any preconceived ideas, but just seeing what, for whatever reason, fits and what seems the natural thing to do. And the other morning, both Phyllis and Alia looking at me felt like the right thing to do, yeah. But often, yeah, you're quite right, they're kind of looking at the sort of three-quarter angle. But also with that three-quarter, you get quite a nice angle of the face, I always think, so you get a different version of the face if you see it full on. Yeah.
Okay, there's a question in the back. I think that's the final question.
Thank you very much for the talk. It's obvious that being a portrait painter is like a really hard work, and it's very serious work as well. But don't you sometimes feel trapped? And don't you want to do some different creative projects, like art projects, maybe to, I don't know, entertain yourself?
Sorry, can you say the last bit again?
Don't you want to do something else other than portraiture sometimes, just to entertain yourself?
Definitely, yeah. I'm a really sort of keen watercolorist as well, and I was saying I've brought my watercolor set here, and we have a couple of afternoons off, so we're looking for a sort of picturesque area of Hong Kong to take my watercolors, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you need to do something different, to keep yourself fresh as well. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope you have a good weather for that.
Thank you. Yeah, fingers crossed. It's sunny, maybe.
I think we have to wrap up. So if you enjoyed this evening, there is another talk organised by the Chao Lee Art Foundation at the Hong Kong Art School next Tuesday with Scottish portrait painter Jennifer McRae. So you can sign into the website, which is www.claf.hk, and that's CLAF.hk. We hope to see you then. In the meantime, thank you, Benjamin.